Officers beat Ronda Rousey's daughter right in the school hallway. She remained silent until she saw her girl in a coma. What she did next shocked everyone. Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. The morning began like any other. Pale sunlight slipped through the linen curtains, casting soft lines across the hardwood floor of the Rousey household. Lakia Rousey sat cross-legged on her bed, brushing out the last knots in her damp blonde curls. Her routine was methodical, peaceful. She rose early, not because she had to, but because the quiet hours before school felt like armor, time to collect herself before the world began to chip away at her edges. Downstairs, the familiar scent of eggs and spinach wafted from the kitchen. Ronda Rousey, in workout leggings and a hoodie with the sleeves shoved up to her elbows, stood over the stove, flipping an omelet with the same precision she once used to dispatch opponents in the octagon. Lakia came down the stairs quietly, school bag slung over one shoulder, water bottle tucked under her arm. "Eat," Ronda said, not looking up from the pan. "I'm not that hungry." "You will be. You always are after the first class. You can't learn on an empty stomach, and you sure as hell can't defend yourself." Lakia smiled faintly. There was comfort in the bluntness, in the way her mother's words came not wrapped in softness, but in strength. She knew what people saw when they looked at her mother. A fighter, a champion, a symbol of strength. But to Lakia, Ronda was just Mom. Tough, fierce, often impatient, but unshakably loyal. The drive to school was quiet. Lakia stared out the window at the shifting skyline of Los Angeles, the palm trees swaying in the wind like they were having silent conversations. When they pulled up to the entrance of Briarwood Academy, a prestigious private school nestled in the hills, Ronda glanced over. "You know, you can always tell me if something's off." "I know." "You'd better," she said, then added more softly, "Have a good day, baby." Lakia smiled again and stepped out into the sun. The school loomed ahead, all stone columns and ivy-covered walls, as if trying too hard to look like something from the East Coast. As she passed through the iron gates, she felt it again, that slight but unmistakable shift in atmosphere. Students greeting one another with rehearsed enthusiasm, teachers sipping lattes as they reviewed notes, and the watchful eyes of campus security perched in shaded corners of the courtyard. She tried not to pay attention to the way some of the girls narrowed their eyes at her, or how a group of boys lowered their voices when she walked by. It wasn't overt, not at first. The exclusion came in silences and glances, and being left out of group chats or partnered last in class projects. She looked white, but everyone knew her background and her last name. At lunch, Lakia sat alone under the sycamore tree near the back of the quad, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. She drew absently, shapes, patterns, anything to keep her mind occupied. Occasionally, she glanced up at the table where Amelie Mathers, one of the popular girls, held court with her clique. Laughter erupted from them, but when Amelie caught Lakia's eyes, the smile on her face twisted just slightly. Later in the day, during chemistry, Lakia tried to focus on the lab assignment. Her partner, a quiet boy named Owen, did most of the mixing while she recorded results. Mr. Kelson, their teacher, moved methodically from table to table. Yet, every time Lakia asked a question, he gave her short, clipped answers, as if she were a disruption. When Amelie asked the same question 5 minutes later, he responded with a grin and a helpful tip. By the time the final bell rang, Lakia felt drained, not from work, but from the constant tension. She waited outside for the carpool van. The school didn't allow direct parent pickups at the front gate unless pre-scheduled. Instead, students were directed to designated areas monitored by campus security. That's when she noticed them. Two security officers, both white men in the standard-issue Navy uniforms. The older one, Sergeant Richard Cole, had a square jaw and gray hair buzzed close to his scalp. He wore dark glasses even though the sky had already dimmed. The younger one, Officer Brian Hart, leaned casually against the railing, arms crossed, his smile just a bit too amused as he watched the students. They had been present since her first week, always standing just close enough to be noticed, always observing. Lakia had thought it was standard at first, part of the school's safety protocol, but over time she noticed the difference. They followed her with their eyes. Once she turned a hallway corner to find them murmuring as she passed. Another time, Cole stopped her and asked what she was doing out of class, even though she had a hall pass visible in her hand. She said nothing and boarded the van. That evening, over dinner, Rhonda asked her about her day. "Fine," Lakia said quickly. Too quickly. Rhonda put down her fork. "What's going on?" "Nothing, Mom." "You're lying. Your voice goes up when you lie." "It's just school stuff. People aren't exactly friendly." Rhonda watched her for a long moment but didn't press. "You don't have to impress anyone. You're not there for them." "I know," Lakia said, but she did want to belong, even if just a little. That night, Rhonda stood in her home gym, hands wrapped, punching the heavy bag, jab, cross, hook, over and over again. She didn't like what she was seeing. Her daughter, strong, sweet, and brilliant, was shrinking, not physically, but emotionally. That was the kind of damage Rhonda knew best. The slow erosion. The kind you don't notice until you're hollow inside. At school the next day, Lakia was called into the principal's office. Mr. Delaney, a thin man in a beige suit and an ever-sweaty brow, sat across from her, his fingers steepled. "There's been a complaint," he began. "Someone claims you made a threatening remark in the locker room." "What?" Lakia blinked. "That's not true." "I'm sure there's a misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "But we have to follow protocol. You'll need to speak with campus security." Her heart began to race. Cole and Hart were already standing by the door. They led her out and down the hallway in silence, flanking her on either side. Students watched as she was escorted past the lockers and classrooms, their gazes curious, some even smug. They took her into a windowless room near the back of the administration wing. The walls were gray, the air thick. Cole sat across from her, Hart beside him. "You know why you're here?" Cole asked. "No, I didn't do anything." "You raised your voice to another student. That can be interpreted as a threat, especially with your background." "My background? You're Ronda Rousey's kid, right? UFC, WWE, that kind of training, it sticks. Muscle memory. You could seriously hurt someone without meaning to." Lakia stared at him, unsure whether he was mocking her or baiting her. Probably both. "I didn't raise my voice." "We have a witness who says otherwise," Hart added, checking something on his tablet. "So, you can either write a statement admitting to the outburst, or we'll have to escalate this." "I didn't do anything," she said, voice trembling. Cole leaned in, his face hard. "Then prove it. Otherwise, this goes on your record. Not a good look for a girl trying to stay in a school like this." Lakia didn't cry. She refused. But when they finally let her go, her hands were shaken. She didn't tell her mother, not yet. She didn't want to look weak. But when she went to bed that night, her dreams were full of locked doors and eyes that watched her from the dark. The days that followed were more of the same. quiet harassment, isolation, rumors spreading that she was violent, dangerous. Some students avoided her, others laughed when she passed. Ronda noticed the change. Her daughter's posture had shifted. She smiled less, answered in clipped words. She was slipping, and Ronda could feel it like a muscle tearing under the surface. She started asking questions. Quietly. Called a teacher she trusted. Looked into the background of the security officers. What she found was troubling. Complaints, buried misconduct files, sealed incidents. Nothing criminal, but enough to raise her suspicions. Then came the anonymous email from a faculty member. One sentence, "Your daughter is not safe at Briarwood." Ronda read it twice, and then once more. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table in the dark, the glow of the screen lighting her face as she dug deeper into school board policies, security protocols, and complaint procedures. She wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. But she would be. And when the moment came, no one would see it coming. Lakia, sleeping upstairs, didn't know that the next few days would change everything. That silence would no longer protect her. That watching would no longer be enough. The storm was coming. And it had her mother's name. The next morning unfolded with a strange quiet. Lakia sat at the breakfast table, listlessly stirring her oatmeal while Ronda, already dressed for a morning run, stood by the kitchen counter scrolling through her phone. Outside, the sun had barely risen, casting long orange shadows through the windows. The house felt unusually still, as if holding its breath. "You've barely touched your food," Ronda said, not looking up. "I'm not hungry." "You said the same thing yesterday." Lakia shrugged, her shoulders tense. She avoided eye contact, her gaze fixed on a small crack in the side of her bowl. Ronda watched her for a moment longer. She could feel the tension radiating off her daughter like heat from pavement. Something was festering beneath the surface. She had seen it before in fighters right before they broke, right before fear turned into silence. "You want me to drive you today?" Lakia shook her head. "Van's fine." "All right, but text me when you get to school." "I always do." "I know, just humor me." When the van pulled up to Briarwood Academy, Lakia stepped out with her hoodie pulled low over her head. The whispers began before she even crossed the courtyard. This time they were not veiled or hushed. She caught fragments. Crazy, violent, freak, as she walked past a group of students huddled by the front entrance. Some glanced up, feigning surprise or curiosity. Others snickered outright. Amelie stood among them, arms crossed, eyes hard. It had spread. The incident in the office had birthed a rumor, a narrative where Lakia had snapped in the locker room and threatened someone. By the time she entered her first period class, the damage was done. Desks shifted slightly away from hers. Her name was spoken with caution, as if proximity to her could be dangerous. She sat down and opened her notebook, trying to breathe past the lump in her throat. At lunch, she found her usual spot under the sycamore tree, already occupied by two boys from the senior class. They didn't move when she approached, only looked at her with raised eyebrows and smirks that sent a chill down her spine. "This spot taken?" she asked softly. "It is now," one of them said. She didn't argue. She turned and walked away, ignoring the soft laugh that followed. In the cafeteria, she sat alone at a corner table. As she ate in silence, a campus security officer passed behind her. Hart, the younger one. He didn't say anything, but she could feel his presence like a weight on her shoulders. She didn't turn around, didn't react. That was what they wanted. The day passed in a blur. By the time the final bell rang, Lakia's legs felt like lead. She had barely spoken a word to anyone all day. In the hallway, as she reached for her locker, she noticed Amelie watching her from across the hall. Their eyes met for a moment. Then Amelie smirked, leaned toward her friend, and said something too low to hear. The girl laughed. Lakia turned back to her locker, jaw clenched. The next morning, everything changed. She arrived at school early, hoping to avoid the rush of students. But as she walked down the hallway toward her first class, she saw the principal waiting for her. Mr. Delaney, always slightly sweaty and tight-lipped, stood with both Sergeant Cole and Officer Hart behind him. All three wore grim expressions. "Lakia," he said, "please come with us." "What is this about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We just need to clear something up," he said. "Routine procedure." They led her past her classroom, past the administrative offices, to a room at the back of the campus building. It was smaller than the previous one, windowless, with a single table and 2 chairs. The fluorescent lighting above flickered faintly. Cole gestured for her to sit. She obeyed. "There was another incident this morning," Cole began. Lakia frowned. "What kind of incident?" "Someone reported illegal substances found in your locker." Her breath caught in her throat. "That's not possible." "Nonetheless," Hart said, tapping on his tablet, "we have to follow protocol." "Someone planted them," she said, finally meeting Cole's eyes. "I didn't do anything." "Is that so?" he asked, leaning forward. "You're saying someone went out of their way to frame you?" "Yes." "Why would they do that?" "Because they think I'm different. Because of who my mom is. Because Amelie hates me." The room fell silent for a moment. Then Cole smiled, slow and unsettling. "You sound paranoid," he said. "I'm not. You're making accusations without proof." "You're making them without proof, too," she snapped, then instantly regretted raising her voice. Cole's smile vanished. He stood. "Let's make something clear. You're not special. We don't care who your mother is. If you're a problem in this school, we deal with it. Same rules for everyone." Hart remained seated, typing something into his device. Lakia tried to keep her hands from trembling. "I want to call my mom." "That's not necessary," Cole said. "Not yet." She stood. "Then I'm leaving. You walk out of here without cooperating, and we escalate." She hesitated, her heart pounding. Something told her not to stay, but the threat in his voice was real. "Sit down," Hart said, his voice quiet but firm. She sat. By the time they let her go, she felt like something inside her had snapped. Not loudly, not like glass breaking, but quiet, like a rope slowly fraying under pressure. She didn't go to class. She sat outside on the far end of the athletic field where no one would see her. She pulled out her phone and stared at her mother's number. Her thumb hovered over the screen, but she didn't press it. She wasn't ready to worry Rhonda, not until she had something concrete. Meanwhile, Rhonda sat in her law office above the bookstore in East Hollywood, reviewing a contract for a new youth MMA program. Her mind wandered repeatedly. The last few nights, she'd been waking up with a knot in her chest she couldn't explain. Something about the way Lakia had gone quiet, the way she smiled without her eyes. Something was wrong. Her phone buzzed. A blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Rousey." "Yes? I'm calling from Briarwood Academy. I can't give my name. But your daughter, she's being targeted. It's coming from the security team. They're building a case. You need to get her out of there." The line went dead. Rhonda stood slowly, the phone still in her hand. She didn't need names. She didn't need proof. She had just received all the confirmation she needed. Back at the school, Lakia was called into the main office once more. This time it was under the guise of a disciplinary review. She was asked to wait in a small reception area. She sat in silence, her legs shaking. From the hallway she heard raised voices. Amelie's name, the word planted, then Cole's voice, low and firm. Then silence. The receptionist looked up at her with a forced smile. "Someone will be with you shortly." Lakia nodded and sat back, willing herself not to cry. Minutes passed. The door opened. Hart gestured for her to follow. She rose and did so, walking down a now familiar hallway that reeked of bleach and bureaucracy. She didn't know it yet, but the next time she would walk through those doors, she wouldn't walk out on her own. The trap was already set, and the people who were supposed to protect her were the ones closing it around her, all according to protocol. The sky that morning was blanketed in an overcast gray that hung low over Los Angeles like a warning not yet spoken aloud. Lakia Rousey sat silently in the back seat of the school van, her fingers curled tightly in her lap. She kept her gaze fixed on the window, watching the blur of city streets pass by without truly seeing them. Something inside her felt brittle, like cracked glass threatening to shatter with the slightest touch. Her sleep had been broken and restless, haunted by images she couldn't quite name, but the feeling they left behind was unmistakable: fear. At Briarwood Academy, the day began with the illusion of normalcy. Students poured through the gates in their crisp uniforms and carefully curated expressions. The laughter in the courtyard sounded too loud to Lakia, like it was meant to cover something up. She moved through the halls with measured steps, her shoulders drawn slightly inward, as though trying to make herself smaller. Whispers followed her like a shadow, but she no longer tried to catch their words. She already knew what they said. Her locker stood at the far end of the hallway, and she approached it with quiet dread. Just yesterday, Amelie and her friends had hovered nearby, pretending not to watch as she collected her books. Today, they were already there, leaning against lockers, feigning indifference as she walked past. Lakia didn't look at them. She opened her locker, reached for her textbook, and froze. Inside, nestled between her folders and gym clothes, was a small plastic bag. It was filled with pills. Her breath hitched. Her heart slammed against her ribs. For a moment, she simply stared, as if maybe the image would change if she looked long enough. Then she glanced quickly down both sides of the hallway. No one was watching now. The girls had disappeared. The hallway was strangely empty. Her instincts screamed at her to take the bag out and run, to flush it, to scream. But her body didn't move. Before she could think, before she could act, she heard the sharp bark of a voice behind her. "Step away from the locker, Rousey." She turned slowly to find Sergeant Cole and Officer Hart already approaching, eyes hard and gleaming. Behind them stood Principal Delaney, his face pale, his arms tightly crossed. She began, but the words lodged in her throat. "Now," Cole snapped. Lakia stepped back, her legs unsteady. Hart reached into her locker, retrieved the bag, and held it up as though it were radioactive. He looked at her with an expression of mock disappointment. "Possession of controlled substances on school property is a serious offense," he said, his voice flat. "I didn't put that there," she whispered. Cole smirked. "Of course you didn't." Delaney didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked away. Cole and Hart flanked her again, like they had so many times before, but this time it was different. There was no pretense of formality, no subtle glances. They didn't bother to hide what this was. Students began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Phones were pulled out. Lakia could feel the heat of a dozen stares on her back as Cole seized her by the arm. "You're coming with us." "You can't," she began. "Resisting a search now, too?" He twisted her arm behind her back and she cried out, the pain sharp and immediate. Hart moved in front of her, blocking the view of bystanders. With a practiced motion, he grabbed her backpack and flung it open, shaking out its contents onto the floor. Pens and papers scattered. "This is illegal," she cried. "I want to call my mom." "No phone," Cole growled. "Not until this is handled." The crowd was growing. Murmurs rippled through it. Several students recorded from behind lockers, their hands shaking. A teacher stepped forward, Mr. Kelson from chemistry, but was halted by a warning glance from Hart. "Stay back," the officer said. Cole forced Lakia toward the wall, pinning her wrist high above her head. She gasped, tears forming in her eyes. The edge of a locker dug into her shoulder blade. She tried to wriggle free, but Cole was solid, unyielding. "Stop moving," he barked. Then came the first blow. A baton slammed into her side, just beneath her ribcage. Pain radiated through her like fire. She screamed, a raw, animal sound that echoed down the hallway. "Stop resisting," Hart shouted, though she had not resisted. Another blow came, this time to her thigh. Her legs buckled. She fell to her knees, breath knocked from her lungs. The floor was cold beneath her palms. A third blow came, striking her lower back. Everything blurred. Someone screamed. Not her. A teacher rushed forward, Mr. Patel from physics, but Hart shoved him back, hand on his holster. "Don't interfere," he hissed. Lakia's world narrowed to sound and pain. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Her vision pulsed at the edges. Then Cole grabbed her by the hair, lifting her face, and she caught sight of the ceiling tiles, harsh and white. Something in her neck cracked as her head was forced back. Her lips moved, trying to form words, but no sound came. And then it all went black. When the paramedics arrived, Lakia was unconscious, lying twisted on the tile floor. A thin trail of blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. Her left arm bent at an angle that no limb should bend. Her uniform was torn, stained with sweat and blood. Mr. Patel knelt beside her, fingers on her neck, voice trembling as he told the EMTs, "She's not responding. Her pulse is weak." Students cried. Teachers stood frozen. Cole and Hart lingered at the edge of the crowd, expressionless. Ronda Rousey was already on her way. She had received a call from an anonymous number. No details, just a clipped message. "It's Lakia. You need to come, now." She arrived at the hospital 10 minutes after the ambulance, her car screeching to a halt in front of the ER. She didn't speak as she walked in, didn't acknowledge the nurse at the desk. She only had to look at the room numbers on the triage board once before she was moving again, her footsteps purposeful, deadly. When she entered the ICU, her world stopped. Lakia lay in a bed too large for her small frame. Her face was nearly unrecognizable, bruised and swollen, one eye darkened and shut, her lip split. A breathing tube snaked from her mouth. Monitors beeped rhythmically beside her. Wires ran from her chest and arms like spider legs. Ronda didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stood still, staring, the tension in her body so great it seemed she might snap in half. A nurse whispered something about swelling in the brain, about a medically induced coma, about possible long-term damage. She didn't respond. Outside the room, a uniformed officer stood guard. Ronda walked up to her. Were you one of them? The officer flinched. No, ma'am. I'm just posted here. I didn't ask what you're doing now, Ronda said, her voice as flat as a blade. I asked if you put your hands on my daughter. The woman didn't answer. Ronda didn't press her. She turned back toward the glass, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall in time with the machines. That night, Ronda went home and opened the old cedar chest in the back of her closet. Inside was her old gear: fingerless gloves, a battered mouthguard, a folded hoodie from her Olympic judo days, and a duffel bag that hadn't been touched since her last sanctioned fight. She unzipped it slowly, the scent of sweat, leather, and memory flooding the room. She reached inside and removed a bundle wrapped in cloth. Her hand ran over the fabric, stopping at a patch sewn into the corner, an eagle gripping arrows, her call sign stitched beneath it. Ghost. Few people in Los Angeles knew what Ronda Rousey had been before the world saw her on television, before UFC, before WWE, before the cameras and the headlines. She had been a tactician, a precision weapon. And now someone had broken the one thing in the world she could not replace. They had mistaken her silence for submission. They would not make that mistake again. Morning in Los Angeles broke quietly, golden light filtering through the blinds of a house that had not slept. Ronda sat at the edge of her daughter's hospital bed, unmoving. Her eyes were dry, but only because there were no tears left. She had stayed awake all night, watching the steady rise and fall of Lakia's chest, counting every beep of the monitors, memorizing every bruise. Nurses came and went. Doctors whispered updates, mostly medical jargon for no change. Ronda only nodded, her gaze fixed. Her daughter's fingers were wrapped in her own, but they never stirred. By the time the sun was fully up, she rose and kissed Lakia's forehead. The gesture was soft. Everything else inside her was not. She walked out of the ICU without a word and stepped into the hallway with the same posture she once carried into cages and rings around the world. She drove home with silence thick in the car. When she entered her house, she didn't turn on the lights. She moved through the rooms with purpose. She changed clothes, pulled her hair back tightly, laced up boots she hadn't worn in years. The duffel bag waited on the kitchen table, heavy with more than just contents. She took it and walked out without hesitation. The first name on her mind was Brian Hart. He was the easier of the two, young, impulsive, the kind who thought his badge gave him authority beyond his understanding. Through quiet connections and digital fingerprints left carelessly on public profiles, Ronda had found where he liked to train, a gritty gym on the edge of the city, open late, known for its no-rules sparring circles. She arrived before dusk. The gym was half-lit, the windows streaked with grime. Inside, the thud of fists on pads echoed off the concrete walls. No one recognized her at first, not in the hooded sweatshirt and plain black leggings, not without the media glare that usually preceded her. She stepped inside and watched. Hart was there. He stood in the far ring, laughing with another man, taping up his wrists. He wore gym shorts and a tight-fitted compression shirt, sweat gleaming on his brow. He looked like a man with no worries. Ronda watched for another moment, her jaw tight. Then she approached the front desk. "Can I get a few rounds?" she asked. The attendant looked her up and down, saw the focus in her eyes, and nodded. "Name?" "Ghost," she said. He blinked. Recognition flared behind his eyes, but he said nothing. 5 minutes later, Ronda stepped into the ring across from Brian Hart. He didn't recognize her at first. She had a mouthguard in. Her hoodie stayed on. The bell rang. The first exchange was simple. Jab, jab, feint. Hart smiled, relaxed. He threw a lazy hook. Rhonda ducked and came up under his arm, slammed her elbow into his ribs. He stumbled. The smile vanished. "You want to play?" he muttered. She didn't answer. Her fist did. Her next combination was fast, practiced. Right cross, left uppercut, inside leg kick. Hart backpedaled. She pressed. He tried to clinch. She broke it, reversed him, and dropped him with a sweep. Gasps rose from the spectators. Hart rolled, face flushed with confusion and pain. "You bitch," he growled, climbing to his feet. She pulled off her hood. The color drained from his face. "You," he breathed. "Yeah," Rhonda said. He lunged. She sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, twisted. His shoulder popped as he dropped again, writhing. She knelt beside him, pressing her knee into his back. No ref stopped her. "That girl you hurt," she said. "That was my daughter. Please." She leaned closer. "You don't get to beg. You should have thought about this before you hit a 13-year-old in the spine with a baton." She took his wrist again and snapped it, clean and clinical. He howled. The gym was silent. No one dared step in. She stood and looked at the stunned crowd. "Call an ambulance," she said coldly. "He'll need it." Then she walked out. She didn't go home. Next was Richard Cole. Cole was smarter, meaner, older. He wasn't the type to be found in a public space. But she knew his kind. Knew where they hid when they thought trouble might find them. Her contacts came through: an off-duty schedule, a vehicle plate, a watering hole on the edge of town where old cops drank away their guilt. It was nearly midnight when she found him. The parking lot behind the bar was dim, shadows stretching long between flickering bulbs. Cole stood alone, smoking, his hand in his jacket pocket. Rhonda approached with deliberate steps. He looked up. His expression was smug until recognition set in. "You've got 5 seconds to turn around," he said. "You had 5 seconds to stop hitting my daughter," she replied. "You wasted them." He reached into his jacket. Rhonda closed the distance with terrifying speed. She grabbed his wrist, slammed it against the brick wall. Something metal clattered to the ground. He swung at her with his free arm. She ducked, drove her knee into his ribs, then elbowed him in the throat. He staggered, gasping, his back against the dumpster. "You think I'm scared of you?" he rasped. "No," she said, "I think you're used to people being scared of you." She hit him in the gut, then the face. His head snapped back. Blood burst from his nose. He raised his arms, but she struck again. Short, brutal strikes honed over a lifetime of precision violence. He dropped to his knees, coughing. "You're a criminal," he croaked. She crouched beside him. "You're the one who put a child in a coma." He tried to spit at her. She grabbed the back of his neck and slammed his head against the concrete once. Not to kill, just enough to send a message. She stood, breathing evenly. Behind her, headlights flickered as a car pulled into the lot. Rhonda turned, eyes steeled. A man stepped out. Tall, dark jacket, face partially hidden. "You're late," Rhonda said. He was one of hers, an old contact from military days. He nodded toward Cole. "What do you want me to do with him?" "Nothing illegal, but make sure every department he ever worked in knows exactly what he did. And make sure he never works again." "Consider it done." She left without looking back. By dawn, both Hart and Cole were in the hospital. One with a broken wrist, the other with a shattered nose and fractured ribs. The official reports listed unidentified assailants. But in the corners of certain offices and under the breath of officers who knew better, a name was whispered. Ghost. At the hospital, Lakia remained unconscious but stable. The swelling in her brain had not worsened. Nurses came in and out, checking vitals, speaking softly. The room was filled with flowers from strangers, letters from supporters, gifts from people who had read what happened online. Ronda sat beside her again, no longer helpless, no longer waiting. The footage from the incident had surfaced overnight, captured by a student who had secretly filmed from behind his locker. The clip was short but damning. It showed Cole dragging Lakia, heart striking her body going limp. The video went viral within hours. News vans camped outside the school. Social media exploded. The district released a statement, feeble and vague, but the damage was done. And Ronda had only just begun. She held her daughter's hand and leaned close. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "They know who you are now." Lakia didn't respond, but Ronda saw the slightest twitch in her fingers. She smiled, not because it was over, but because it wasn't. And now it was her turn to make the system bleed. Morning light streamed through the hospital window with soft, golden insistence, warming the sterile white walls and casting long shadows across the machines that lined Lakia's bed. Ronda had not slept. She hadn't intended to. She sat in the same chair she had occupied since before sunrise, her hands folded in her lap, her back straight, her eyes on her daughter's pale face. The silence of the room was broken only by the mechanical rhythms of the monitors, a sound that had become both comfort and torment. Each beep confirmed that her child still breathed, that her fight was not yet over. But it also reminded Ronda that Lakia remained trapped in a place she could not reach, not with her fists, not with her voice, not even with her presence. A nurse entered quietly, adjusted a drip, checked vitals, and offered Ronda a sympathetic smile before retreating. Ronda didn't return it. Her emotions were not available for comfort. The night before, she had punished the two men who had laid their hands on her daughter, not through lawyers, not through petitions, not through silence, through direct, precise force. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. The problem wasn't just Hart or Cole. It was the system that had allowed them to walk through school hallways with impunity, to treat a child like a threat because of who her mother was, or because her skin didn't fit into a narrow category of acceptance. The video had exploded across the internet. Within 12 hours, millions had seen what happened in the hallway of Briarwood Academy. The footage wasn't long, 47 seconds, but it was undeniable. It captured Lakia being pressed against lockers, her arms twisted, her face contorted in pain. It showed the first baton strike, her collapse, and the moment Cole shoved her limp body toward the floor. The sound of her scream, cut off midway, echoed through the minds of everyone who watched. The public reaction was immediate and unforgiving. Parents protested. Teachers resigned. The school district scrambled to contain the fallout. Ronda had released no public statement. Not yet. She waited. Not because she lacked something to say, but because she was preparing to say it in a way no one could ignore. At noon, her phone buzzed on the table beside her. She answered without looking. "We're ready," said the voice on the other end. Ronda stood. She kissed her daughter on the forehead, whispered something only Lakia could hear, and walked out of the room. 3 hours later, she stood before a wall of cameras on the steps of City Hall. She wore a dark navy suit, her hair pulled tightly back, no makeup, no jewelry. There was no pretense, only message. The press conference had been called not by the school board, not by the police department, but by Ronda herself, and the world had come. She stepped to the microphone, the crowd hushed. "My name is Ronda Rousey," she began. "I am a fighter, a mother, a daughter. I've broken bones for a living, I've fought champions, but nothing prepared me for this. Nothing prepared me for what it would feel like to see my 13-year-old daughter lying unconscious in a hospital bed, breathing through a machine, because two armed men decided she looked like a threat. Flashes clicked, pens scratched, no one interrupted. They said she resisted. The video shows otherwise. They said it was protocol. I've read the protocol. Nowhere in it does it say you beat a child into a coma. Nowhere does it say you plant drugs in a locker and then parade that child through a hallway like a criminal in front of her classmates. Ronda's voice did not waver. It didn't need to. For days, I was quiet. I sat beside her bed and waited. I hoped someone else would act, that someone in power would speak up, but no one did. So I reminded them who I am, and what I can do. She paused. The silence was thick. Let me be clear. This is not about vengeance. This is not about violence. This is about justice. And I will not stop until every person who failed my daughter is held accountable. From her pocket, she withdrew a folder. She held it high. In here are internal complaints, sealed disciplinary records, emails between school administrators and law enforcement officers, names, dates, actions taken and not taken. This is not just about two rogue officers. This is a network of people who chose silence over duty. She placed the folder on the podium. I'm calling for a federal investigation into Briarwood Academy and its contracted security team. I'm demanding the resignation of Principal Delaney, Sergeant Richard Cole, Officer Brian Hart, and every administrator who had knowledge of these actions and did nothing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters raised hands. Ronda ignored them. And to every parent out there, this could have been your child, your daughter, your son. The only difference is mine has a voice behind her. And now, so do you. She stepped away from the podium. The crowd erupted. She didn't stay to answer questions. That evening, Ronda returned to the hospital. News vans still crowded the entrance. Protesters stood across the street holding signs that read, "Justice for Lakia and protect our kids." Ronda moved past them without a word. Inside, she found a nurse she trusted. "Any change?" she asked. The nurse hesitated. "Stable. No signs of regression." Ronda nodded. Her jaw clenched. She walked back to Lakia's room and sat down again. Hours passed. She read quietly from a book they used to enjoy together. Her voice was steady, almost soft. The story faded into silence. She reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her daughter's forehead. "I made them hear us," she said, almost to herself. "But that's not enough. Not yet." Just before midnight, Lakia's hand twitched. Ronda froze. Then it happened again. "Baby?" she whispered, leaning closer. Lakia's eyes fluttered. The heart monitor beeped faster. A nurse rushed in. Ronda barely noticed. Her daughter's eyelids opened fully, unfocused at first, but unmistakably awake. "Lakia," Ronda said, tears suddenly welling in her eyes. Lakia looked at her. Her lips moved. "Mom!" Ronda broke. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to her daughter's. She laughed, choked by relief and love. "You're safe now, I promise." Outside the room, a nurse whispered into her phone. Moments later, hospital staff gathered. A doctor appeared. Words were exchanged. Hope swept through them like electricity. The next day, Ronda stood again before cameras. This time, she did not speak about pain. "My daughter is awake," she said. "She is alive. But this story is not just hers. I have received over 600 letters from families whose children were harmed in silence. I carry their stories now, too. I was too quiet. But I will not be again." She paused, then continued. I'm calling for the dismantling and full restructuring of all private security programs in California schools. I'm demanding civilian oversight, transparency, and accountability." A reporter shouted, "Some critics say you're going too far. What do you say to them?" Ronda looked directly into the lens. "I say we haven't gone far enough." In Washington, a Department of Justice official received Ronda's petition. He read every line, every attached testimony, every photograph. He made a phone call. "Activate it," he said. 2 days later, Ronda received a letter. A single line inside, "You were right, we're coming." She held the paper in her hands, her breath steady. Then she turned towards the city beyond the window, bruised, wounded, but finally awake. She was no longer a mother standing alone, and her daughter was no longer silent. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and check out our other stories next. You won't want to miss what's coming.